Good morning, Ida here. And today I thought I'd make a video about Harm None. It's actually a VR to Heather Carter. She is doing a ABC on paganism thing, and now she has made a Age is for Harm None, and I thought that is a really interesting subject, so I thought I'd just talk a little bit about that. I basically agree with her, but there are some things that I wanted to bring up that, my own thoughts. And I came to paganism and witchcraft through Wicca. That was sort of my way in, but I don't identify as Wiccan now. I started there, but then my path evolved and changed so much that now I don't feel that it doesn't make sense for me to call myself Wiccan. What I do is a bit too different from what most Wiccans do for it to make sense. But I'm still quite heavily influenced by Wicca. I think there is a lot of things in Wicca that really speak to me. And actually, this is a bit off topic, but I've noticed in perhaps the last year or so, especially in places like Facebook, there seems to be a lot of, among other pagans and witches, there seems to be quite a lot of, prejudice against Wiccans. I've seen a lot of witches and pagans speak in a rather condescending way about Wiccans, and I always feel that that's not really fair. The things that I hear, these people, not all pagans, not all witches of course, but these people that do speak of Wicca in a condescending way, I always feel that what they're saying about Wicca doesn't really match my experience with Wicca, or the kind of Wicca that I'm familiar with and that some of my friends are still practicing. So I feel like that attitude towards Wiccans seems to be coming from a place of prejudice and perhaps ignorance, and I think that is a bit sad. But that was a bit off topic. I was going to talk about Harm None, and I will. It is basically in that form, and it Harm None, do as I will is is something that comes from Wicca in that form, but I think it has a lot of merit to it. But you can't reduce it, and this is something that Heather says too, you can't reduce it to just Harm None, because that would be impossible. But I'm sorry, I just woke up and apparently my throat didn't. Now where was I? Anytime I do that, what that will, it's basically like a version of the golden rule that you encounter in a lot of religions, a lot of cultures, and it makes sense that it is fairly universal, because if you're a human being, you will need to live fairly close to other human beings, you will need to interact with them, and you will need to have a way of you will need to have values that that speaks about not hurting everyone, whenever. And I wanted to say also that most people, I think, nowadays seems to think of humans as inherently violent and inherently aggressive. I don't. Humans are violent, humans are aggressive, but all animals can be violent and aggressive under certain circumstances, and I think that the violence that we see in the world today is mostly due to the fact that as all animals, humans can become violent under certain circumstances when they're put under certain kinds of stress, and I think it has a lot to do with the kind of culture that we live in, rather than that we are inherently and necessarily violent. And I don't agree, because people that argue that humans are inherently violent, they tend to say that of course we are. I mean, look at all the violence that's going on in the world. Look at all the terrorism, look at all the violent crime, look at all the wars. But honestly, if you look at the whole history of the world, if you look at on a global scale, violence is still the exception. It doesn't look like it, because we have media that likes to talk about violence, and we have the movies and all that likes to talk about violence. And I'm not saying that violence isn't happening, of course it is, but statistically, most of the time, for most humans are not violent. Wars are the exception, terrorism are the exception. I mean, just look at what it's like right now. How many individuals are involved in war or terrorism or violent crime, and how many aren't? And it's the same throughout history. The majority has always not been involved in violence the majority of the time. So violence is not the natural state for humans. It's an extreme response to stress, basically. So the golden rule, it makes sense because it's something that most people tend to live by anyway, but it's also something that people need to be reminded of under certain circumstances in order to be able to live together. And the thing is also with the read, the anytime noun, do as I will, it's very sound advice, but that is just what it is. It's advice. It's not a law. It's not a rule etched in stone, and it's not. It doesn't say just do what. It doesn't say just don't harm anyone. That's not what it says. It says if it doesn't harm anyone, then you can do whatever you want, whatever you feel is your higher will. And it kind of implies that, but if it does harm anyone, maybe you should think about it a bit more before you do it, which makes sense. And of course, never ever hurting anyone is really not possible. I mean, we can't live without hurting anyone. If nothing else, then we have to hurt animals and plants to survive, because we need to eat. And I feel as an animist that is something that we also need to reflect on. Like, what kind of harm is reasonable and necessary and proportional, and what can we do to minimize the harm, and what how do we relate to the fact that we are pretty much constantly doing harm to others, whether we like it or not. I mean, especially in our modern world, just living now is for the most part causing harm to the environment and thus to other creatures. Just look at the way we produce food, which is harming the environment. If you eat meat, definitely harming other animals. But also, like other things, driving is bad for the environment. And like the fashion industry, like wearing clothes, the fashion industry is causing a lot of damage to the environment. But I mean, we can't walk around naked, can we? Especially not in Sweden, because it's freaking cold most part of the year. So causing harm to others is inevitably part of being alive. And we need to be aware of that, and we need to think about that. Everyone needs to figure out how we relate to that. And I think, even in the Stone Age, we did do it. It's not like I'm saying that, oh, modern people, our lifestyle is so horrible. I kind of think it is, but that's beside the point. I mean, people in the Stone Age also had to cause harm to animals and plants, of course. But I think I'm rambling now, but I think it's something that's important to think about. It's not just something that is for Wiccans or Christians or Muslims or Jews or whatever. It's something that we all need to think about and relate to one way or the other. So I think I don't think the "and it's harm none, do as they will" thing is really that bad. And that's, I think, all I had to say today. Please subscribe if you wanna see more things from me. Also, if there's something in particular you want me to talk about, please let me know. Thank you for watching.